The NFL is home of the greatest stories you'll ever hear, whether it be the story of Michael Orr protecting the blind side, escaping poverty, or you could look at a guy like Tom Brady, who really was cast down on, not looked at as a starting quarterback, to only win the most Super Bowls of any quarterback ever. While those stories are great, the next story is yet to be written, but one of the greatest candidates to be the next great NFL story is Brock Purdy, a young quarterback who is really written off to start his career, labeled as Mr. Irrelevant, but ever since he's entered on the NFL field, he looks like one of the deadliest players across the entire league. Especially when you look at his season this year, he's delivering the ball with great timing and anticipation, but he's also leading one of the deadliest teams across the NFL. I don't even need to do the talking, however, because when you look at Brock Purdy's stats, they speak for themselves. He comes in number 1 in the following categories: completion percentage, yards an attempt, passer rating. He's also top 3 in a bunch of other categories, including yards, touchdowns, and interceptions thrown. But what I believe is most exciting and the greatest story yet to be written is what Brock Purdy hasn't done yet. While this isn't to downplay anything Brock Purdy has done up to this point, because being an MVP candidate coming back from a UCL tear is frankly incredible, I am just pointing out Brock Purdy is in his beginning stages of his career, and I think he's a quarterback who continually improves week in and week out. To highlight this point, I believe the recent game against the Seattle Seahawks tells a story of a quarterback who's able to overcome adversity. Purdy early in this game struggled, but nonetheless, he was able to finish this game with the most yards in his career for a single game, coming out at 368. He also had a rating of 122, 2 touchdowns, a completion percentage of 70%. But before having such a strong game, Purdy needed to crack what Seattle was doing to him, and he struggled early on. In this instance, Seattle is running man coverage, but in the safety position, they have something more interesting going on. Number 6, Diggs in this case, is playing a QB spy almost on Brock Purdy, but rather than watching when he's going to take off and run, he's just waiting for Brock Purdy to make the decision where to throw the ball. This next instance, San Francisco is facing a zone coverage from Seattle, but in a similar way, you can see how Jamal Adams, 33 in this case, is watching Brock Purdy all day and triggers as soon as he releases his ball. To remedy this situation, I noticed San Francisco start to try to attack the wide receivers more frequently in this game, and it worked. He connected with Brandon Ayuk deep down the field. And on this next one, it would have been completion to Ayuk if Ayuk ran the correct route. After this, you could see Kyle Shanahan on the sideline speaking to Ayuk, and Brock Purdy looked kind of disappointed here. So while this is an interception and this goes as Brock Purdy's stats, I think this is more of a story of miscommunication than Brock Purdy necessarily making the wrong decision. When you examine when Brock Purdy is throwing this ball, what I'm saying becomes more obvious. He's throwing it at the top of Brandon Ayuk's break, and he's expecting him to run more of a curl type route, but Ayuk runs a hitch type route, which is why we can see this interception. So while this is partially on Brock Purdy, I also put it on Brandon Ayuk. More important than the mistakes a young quarterback makes is how he responds to those mistakes, and Brock Purdy does a great job identifying man coverage and finding Brandon Ayuk across the middle. And while I believe that these type of throws really constitute the majority of quarterback work, it's also important to have a gunslinger quarterback who, despite throwing interception, is willing to go deep. And here, Purdy's first read is Juwan Jennings, but he sees that Deebo Samuel just blows by a flat-footed Jamal Adams, and this pass is perfectly placed. This is why San Francisco traded up the house to get Trey Lance, but they got it with the last pick in the draft, and he's executing like an MVP right now. But because Brock Purdy comes in around 6 foot and 200 pounds, people say he doesn't have the physical tool set to get it done in the NFL, but I don't know what they're talking about. On this play, for example, Purdy has to escape the pocket and find Ayuk deep down the field. If another quarterback like Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts made a throw like this, people would be freaking out, and it would be on replays weekly. But because it's Brock Purdy, people say it's all because of the weapons around him. But as you can tell, Purdy is the one that has to escape this pocket and make the perfect pass to Ayuk deep down the field. So while many people will look at Brock Purdy and say he can't be an elite quarterback because of some arbitrary measurement, when you watch him play the quarterback position on the field, you can tell he's not limited. He's able to consistently get the most out of his team because he's able to attack the defense regardless of what the defense is trying to do to him. This isn't to say Brock Purdy would run a similar offense as Lamar Jackson and be successful, but I'm just highlighting Brock Purdy can do everything at such a high level, a defense can't pigeonhole him like a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo who truly struggled to throw deep. Purdy is a complete quarterback, and while many people look at plays where he dumps off to Deebo Samuel and say, well, that's the only reason he's good, the fact is, he's just one of the best quarterbacks across the entire NFL, and he proves it week in and week out. So while many people have hyper-focused on a quarterback with a huge arm coming in at 6'4", I think they need to start looking at a quarterback who is able to perform at a high level on the field. Take this next play for example. While this is just one play in the Seattle game, I think it shows something Brock Purdy has been able to do throughout the year, and that's process what the defense is doing. Specifically, he's been going towards guys that have been held early on in their routes. And while this often doesn't result in a PI, it does result in more flags being thrown for this, I believe, than in past years. Perhaps what makes Purdy the most perfect fit for this Kyle Shanahan offense though is his ability to run these play action passes and deliver with great anticipation, timing, and accuracy. I mean, you place this ball any other spot, it's probably going to be picked off. While this is a fumble, Purdy couldn't have placed this ball better for Ayuk to get maximum yak and really make this a huge play. What I love most about Purdy though is his ability to remain cool and collected under pressure situations. Here, facing third down, Purdy doesn't panic, but rather goes through his progression and quickly identifies what the defense is doing. They're in zone coverage, but right here, I want to focus on Kittle's route. Kittle is running a corner route with Deebo Samuel running a streak route. As you can tell, the defender follows Deebo Samuel up the field in this zone coverage, so Purdy is able to find the open spot in the zone, hitting Kittle. If this defender would have flowed upwards towards Kittle, however, Brock Purdy would have hit Deebo Samuel deep. This is just one example of how Purdy is able to consistently get the ball to the right place. So while some may label Brock Purdy as a system quarterback or a great story up to this point, I think Brock Purdy's story is yet to be finished. I believe he's one of the deadliest quarterbacks across the entire NFL, and with San Francisco's offense, he could be one of the best quarterbacks for years to come. But these ultimately are just my thoughts on Brock Purdy and San Francisco. But I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. It would also mean a ton to me if you liked and subscribed. And as always, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.